Welcome, everyone, to the official kickoff of Jewish Americans for Kamala Harris. We are thrilled that more than 3,000 of you registered to join us today, and we have so many great speakers that are ready to speak with us about why they're supporting Kamala Harris for president. I'm Ron Klein, the founding board chair of the Jewish Democratic Council of America, the political home and voice of Jewish voters, advocating for policies, educating and mobilizing Jewish voters, and electing Democrats who share our core values. One such Democrat, of course, is Vice President Kamala Harris, and we are thrilled that in the past 12 days, Kamala Harris has fundamentally changed the trajectory of this election. We have seen great enthusiasm for her candidacy all over the country, including among Jewish voters, because Vice President Harris shares our views on every key issue that's driving the Jewish vote, from defending democracy and abortion rights to combating anti-Semitism and extremism and standing with Israel. We thank you for being here, especially those of you who have recently joined our movement or are joining for the first time. We encourage you to stay involved, be involved, find ways to join us with the work that we do, and join our efforts to elect Democrats, including Vice President Kamala Harris. And with 95 days until Election Day, it's time to get to work. I'm now going to pass it over to our CEO of JDCA, Haley Soifer, who will moderate today's program. Haley?
Thank you, Ron, and welcome to the thousands of you joining us today from around the country. It's a demonstration of the strength of our movement. JDCA is the voice and political home of Jewish voters in support of Democrats who share our values, and we are mobilizing Jewish voters to elect Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States. In the past 12 days, as the vice president has reshaped this election, different groups, women, Black women, white dudes, Swifties, have convened in support of the vice president. Now it's our turn, and we're making our support known with the remarkable number of people on this call, including our speakers, members of Congress, rabbis, celebrities, and all of you. Thank you for showing up. Now it's time to get to work. So over the next hour, you're going to hear from elected officials and other leaders from around the Jewish community and around the country about why they are supporting Kamala Harris for president. But our efforts don't end there. Our work has just begun, and we hope that you'll all be a part of it by joining us in our phone banks, in our text banks, in our canvases, and supporting our work. The links to get involved and to mobilize the Jewish vote in this critically important election are going to be posted in the chat. We're here because Jewish voters make a difference in the outcome of elections. This has historically been the case, and it's true today for three reasons. First, because our voter turnout rates are higher than the average voter by about 10 to 15%. Second, it's because of where we live in battleground states and swing districts that will decide the majorities in the House and the Senate. And third, because we overwhelmingly support Democrats and are a crucial part of a winning Democratic coalition. And no, Donald Trump, this isn't just out of habit, as he recently said. It's because Democrats align with the vast majority of Jewish voters on every key issue, and Republicans under Trump represent the antithesis of our values. It's even more true today than ever before, but we can't take anything for granted. The stakes have never been higher in an election, and now we must do everything we can to make sure that we elect Kamala Harris, the next president of the United States. So thanks for being here, and we're going to dive in. I'm going to start by introducing Julie Zebrak, an author, lawyer, and member of JDCA's new leadership council, who spent 18 years at the Department of Justice. Some of you may recognize her since she also kicked off this week's Women for Kamala event. Julie is a nationally known activist and advocate for protecting access to reproductive rights. And Julie, if you could please tell us why you support Kamala Harris for president and why other Jewish Americans must support her as well, and what we can do to get her elected. Julie.
Hi, thank you so much, Haley and Ron, and thank you everybody for coming today. I'm so excited about the huge number of people on this call And I'm so excited about the energy that we're seeing around the country in supporting the vice president, particularly from the Jewish community. So as Haley mentioned, I'm Julia Zebrack. I've actually been on, I'm what you call an OG. I've been on Team Kamala since supporting her during her days in the Senate. I co-founded Mamas for Kamala in 2019 when she was running for president as a way to get women and grandmas and moms active in helping elect a first woman president. But I'm also a delegate in Maryland. But today I want to talk to you about the vice president's record on Israel with Jewish Americans, on anti-Semitism, and why I feel comfortable as a Jewish woman and am actually not just comfortable, enthusiastic about voting for Kamala Harris in November. So I am aware, as are many of us, that there has been a lot going on since October 7th in the Jewish community in Israel, and we are all dealing with a lot of mixed emotions, a lot of fear. And some of that I want to address today in talking to you about the vice president's record. I have been following very closely both the president's words and actions since October 7th, as well as the vice president's words and actions. And I want to just emphasize for all of you and help you sort of build this muscle memory that Vice President Harris has always been and continues to be a strong and consistent supporter for Israel. Just this week, when she landed in Atlanta, Georgia, she talked about her strong support for Israel and its right to defend itself. But let me even go back further. When she was a U.S. Senator, her first act was introducing a resolution to condemn a UN Security Council resolution criticizing Israel. She voted to ensure Israel's security throughout her years in the Senate. She's repeatedly condemned Hamas's and Hezbollah's brutal attacks on since October 7th, and she supported consistently, loudly, and clearly that she supports Israel's right to defend itself. She's been a full partner with the president in providing critical U.S. support. She participated in over 20 meetings with Benjamin Netanyahu, and she has worked with other members of Israel's leadership to make sure that everyone knows that she is behind Israel. Sorry for, anyway. I also want to talk to you about her support for the financial package. She worked to win passage of the latest supplemental aid, providing Israel with badly needed military supplies, and worked the phones to make with her colleagues in the Senate and in the House to make sure that passed. She's met with multiple hostage families, including last, I guess it was in June, so 2 months ago. She hosted an event at the White House focused on Hamas's use of sexual violence, and she included and met privately with a former Israeli hostage who survived sexual assault. She also at the event screened Sheryl Sandberg's film Screams Before Silence. She is very, very focused on issues such as conflict-related sexual violence, and she has been a consistent advocate for Israeli women since October 7th on this particular issue. I also want to reiterate that she speaks out clearly and frequently about anti-Semitism in the United States. Just 2 weeks ago, she made a very clear statement that I'd like to read to you during Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to Washington, when the flag burners were there and there was desecration in Washington. She said very clearly, I condemn any individuals associating with the brutal terrorist organization Hamas, which has vowed to annihilate the state of Israel and kill Jews. Pro-Hamas graffiti and rhetoric is abhorrent, and we must not tolerate it in our nation. I condemn the burning of the American flag. That flag is a symbol of our highest ideals as a nation and represents the promise of America. It should never be desecrated in that way, and I support the right to peacefully protest, but let's be clear. Anti-Semitism, hate, and violence of any kind have no place in our nation. Through her actions, through her words, the vice president has been a partner to President Biden and a partner to Israel. She reiterated that with Prime Minister Netanyahu when they met last week. If there's anything that I can do to reassure you about the need to elect this president, both on behalf of the Jewish Americans and behalf of the women of this country who are extremely concerned about Project 2025 and the actions that the Trump and GOP administration would impose on women, please feel free to reach out. Like many of you, I have daughters, I have nieces, and whether we're voting for the vice president for her Jewish values and her commitment to Israel, or we're voting for our sisters and daughters and nieces, I just want to encourage all of you to lend your support and help us spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. It's meaningful, not just given your leadership role and government role, but also because you are a member of JDCA's New Leaders Council. We are so proud to have you as a part of our movement. I will also just reiterate, having worked for then Senator Harris on issues related to Israel and having traveled to Israel with her, I can assure everyone on this call that her support of Israel not only is completely aligned with that of President Biden, but it predates even her time in the White House. I saw it firsthand when I was in the Senate. She's been a staunch supporter of the U.S.-Israel relationship in the lead up to, of course, and now in the aftermath of the horrific attacks of October 7th. And I was also there to see the powerful words that she gave in the White House recently, condemning the use of sexual violence by Hamas on that horrific day. She is absolutely a supporter, not just of Israel, but also of our community. So now we're going to hear from a leader in our community, the senior senator from Maryland. We are so honored to have Senator Ben Cardin, the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And Senator Cardin has been a strong ally, both in terms of his support of Israel, but also furthering U.S. national security interests around the world. Senator, thank you for joining us. Please tell us why you support Kamala Harris for president.
Well, Hallie, first of all, thank you and Ron for getting us all together, and we really appreciate the work of the Jewish Democratic Council. And thank you all for being on this call. I served with Kamala Harris in the United States Senate. I know her well. I worked with her on issues concerning foreign policy as well as domestic issues. I've had a chance to work with her very closely as Vice President of the United States. We've been together in foreign policy situations as well as domestic issues. I can tell you firsthand, she has the right values, the experience, the talent. Her record is one that she is by and far the person who should be the next president of the United States. But when you compare her to who she's running against, this is not even a contest. So from the Jewish community, we very strongly believe in values. And we believe that our policies, both domestically and internationally, need to be based upon our democratic values. Kamala Harris is the person who will carry on the great leadership of Joe Biden. I want to give a shout out to Joe Biden. What a class person he is, what an incredible record he has as president. And I do chair the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And Julie mentioned a lot of the specific issues, so I'm not going to repeat that. I can tell you I meet with our foreign leaders around often, our allies who share our democratic values. And just take a look at what happened this week with the release of the unlawfully detained individuals. That only happened because we are engaged with our allies around the world who would do things to help us in order to get Americans back home. It was a complicated transaction, and Joe Biden repaired the damage done by Donald Trump on our international relations and our coalitions. And Kamala Harris will continue in that tradition, recognizing that America stands globally for democratic values, and we're the leader, and we need strong leadership in the world, and Kamala will provide that. Now, what does that mean for Israel? What does that mean for the Jewish community? Israel needs the United States to be effective in the international community, to have Israel's back. Joe Biden's done that. Kamala Harris will do that. To isolate America is to isolate Israel in international forums, and the Harris administration will provide the type of foreign policy that's critically important for the United States and our allies, such as Israel. I agree with what Julia said. Her record, Kamala Harris's record, has been incredibly strong in support of U.S.-Israel relations. It's in her gut. She understands the importance of this relationship from the United States and from Israel, the special relationship that exists between our two countries. But let me just take it one step further in our challenges that we're having in fighting anti-Semitism today. Of course, as we all know, Doug Emhoff has been our leader in fighting and developing a national strategy to fight anti-Semitism. But Kamala understands that you can't do this alone. You got to build coalitions and groups to help get rid of all forms of hate and discrimination. And again, her whole career has been based upon that type of commitment to fairness and tolerance. Again, her record is great. The person she's running against is just the opposite, would encourage that type of discrimination. So this is a very clear election. We hadn't even gotten to the domestic issues of protecting a women's right, reproductive rights, or to deal with our global commitments on the climate, or to deal with gun violence and having a president who understands that we have to have sensible gun safety rules. Right on down the line, Kamala Harris represents the values of the Jewish community. She represents the values of America, and she'll be a strong voice globally to maintain the type of coalitions that we need and partners in order to advance these values. I strongly support her, and I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make sure she's elected president of the United States.
Thank you so much, Senator Cardin. We appreciate it. I would now like to welcome Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt. Rabbi Holtzblatt represents is at Addis Israel congregation in Washington, D.C.'s largest conservative synagogue. I'm proud to say, my rabbi, and she's been named one of the most inspiring rabbis in the country, which I can attest. Absolutely. I also know that she has a really meaningful and important connection with the vice president and the second gentleman. I've seen it firsthand, and I know that they look to you, Rabbi, in many ways, and I'd love to hear more about it. And if you could speak about why you are supporting Kamala Harris for president.
Thank you, Haley, for having me today and for doing this. This is so important. I could tell you that we need to elect Vice President Kamala Harris because as Jews, our sacred texts teach us to build a world where we feed the hungry, where we care for the sick, where we love the stranger, where we guard and nurture this planet. Those are her values. That is what her policies seek to achieve, and that would be enough. But I want to encourage us all to get out the vote for Kamala, not only because of her track record and her values, but also because of what I've seen of her outside of the spotlight. My grandfather, the son of immigrants from Poland, served the United States military in World War II. After the war, he couldn't get a job in America with the last name Shapiro. In order to feed his family, he changed his name to Packard. America was a place that gave his family life and opportunity, but only if he hid his identity as a Jew. 80 years later, as his granddaughter, I led the vice president's Seder at her residence this past Pesach. I walked past the mezuzah on her front door. In the privacy of the dining room of the vice president and the second gentleman, we lit Yom Tov candles. We sang Dayenu. We ate matzah as we discussed the modern afflictions of racism, poverty, and the overturning of Roe. And we talked at length about the hostages. We talked about the critical ceasefire negotiations and the endless hours the vice president and the president were committing to get all of the hostages home. We talked about Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, and the other hostages from 17 other countries being held in Gaza. We talked at length about the need for Israel's security, which the VP has stood steadfast for, as you've heard in the previous speakers on this call, but also the need for peace and an end to the war. There were no cameras. There was no press. This is who she is. And I've seen it again and again. She understands the Jewish American experience in its multifaceted nuances. She understands generational trauma, and she rejects false binaries. She seeks to build a world with both a secure Israel and a future for the Palestinian people. She knows both are possible. Judaism is a strong part of her life, and quite frankly, she gets us. As a woman, as a rabbi, as a Jew, and as an American, I could not think of a more compassionate, fearless champion to lead this country. Let's get out the vote and elect Kamala Harris for president. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. That was inspiring. I'm with you. I'm with you. And she really is a part of our community, given that the second gentleman is Jewish, that they have the mezuzah on the vice president's residence. And as he told us last week, he wants to put it on the White House, and we share that goal. Okay, thank you. We are now happy to welcome Governor Polis of Colorado. Thank you so much, Governor, for taking the time to join us. You have been a strong advocate for abortion rights, for education, and for strengthening the economy. Governor, can you talk to us about why it is so important that we elect Kamala Harris, the next president of the United States?
Thank you, Haley. Great to be with everybody. I'm so excited, of course, as an American and of course a Jewish American, to support Kamala Harris to be the next president of the United States. Of course, I'm also excited to have the opportunity to have the first gentleman ever, because this is our first woman president we're talking about, but also a first gentleman who happens to be Jewish as well. Particularly an exciting opportunity. You know, when I reposted this, as we all did, this Jewish Americans for Kamala Harris, it was really interesting to see, of course, some of the hate spewing forward on social media. But I wanted to kind of characterize that. There's a lot of the people that are saying, hey, you're not real Jews if you support Kamala Harris. This is often said by non-Jews, by the way. You know, to be Jewish, you need to do this. You need to support. And how absurd on a number of levels. First of all, obviously, upwards of probably 70% of Jewish Americans are, and I hope more, are going to vote for Kamala Harris. I hope we get up to 80%. But secondly, we are all have full agency in expressing our Jewish identity consistent with our values as we see fit, and applying those values of tikkun olam and healing the world. I mean, there's no question in my mind that the president we need, the president we deserve, is Kamala Harris. And of course, we can talk about why the alternative is dangerous. But one notable fact is that I don't see so many Jewish Americans supporting Kamala Harris questioning the Judaism of those who support the other candidate. And nor do I. I think they might be misguided. I think they're supporting a candidate who's worse for our country. But if Donald Trump does get 20% of Jewish votes, again, I hope he gets less. But whatever he gets, I'm not questioning their Judaism, nor should any Jewish American who supports Donald Trump, or any American who supports Donald Trump, ever question the Judaism that any of us on this call express, any of you watching this express. To do so is in and of itself an anti-Semitic act. And we are all proud of our Judaism in so many different ways, and in so much the diversity of our faith. But look, when you apply the values of our faith to the candidates, right? I mean, helping those with least among us, promoting safety and security, of course, for the Jewish state of Israel, but also for the people of Ukraine, the people of the world. I know that Kamala Harris is the candidate we need to guide us. She has the experience, of course, putting criminals behind bars through our legal system. She's a criminal as an attorney general, fighting for consumers, as a U.S. senator with extensive international experience as vice president of the United States, to lead on day one and to make sure that we move forward as a country towards a better world, rather than back to the chaos of the Donald Trump presidency. Chaos for our economy, chaos for our place in the international world, a lack of application of the Jewish values we share to everyday problems, scapegoating of communities, including, by the way, from people that were supporters of Donald Trump, often scapegoating of the Jewish community, among many others, which we also in many ways see with regard to some of the rhetoric being used against Jewish supporters of Kamala Harris. So I think that this is an enormous opportunity for our country, really a fork in the road, for us to take a path consistent with our values to elect a president who will fight for all of us, fight to protect our freedom, fight for a better future, versus returning to the division and hatred of the past. These old tropes that never seem to die, that sadly have been given new life on social media, that I think we can put to rest by decisively electing Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. I couldn't be more excited to be supporting Kamala Harris, whether in any way that I can. I know that she's going to be an amazing president and one that we can be proud of as Americans, and yes, that we can be extremely proud of as Jewish Americans, securing a peaceful future for the state of Israel, as well as making sure that no Americans face discrimination regardless of their faith, their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their ethnicity. One that is fully inclusive of all Americans, including my fellow Jewish Americans and all of our diversity. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for supporting Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
Thank you so much, Governor. We appreciate it. We appreciate your leadership.
And
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, everybody, as well.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. I'm glad that the governor mentioned the hate that we've seen on the other side. It is important for us to recognize that Donald Trump and his supporters, they don't talk about the issues. They have continued to talk in terms of vitriol and hate, denigrating a lot of communities, including ours. And for the past 5 years, yes, since August of 2019, Donald Trump continues to say that Jews who support Democrats, the vast majority of us, are disloyal or uninformed, hate our religion, all of these things. That's all he's got. So let's work together in support of something, and that is a candidate who shares our views and values, not one who continues to traffic in hate. Okay, now over to Mandana Dayani. We're very happy to have you today, Mandana. You are a human rights activist and co-founder of I Am a Voter, a nonpartisan organization that promotes voter turnout and civic engagement. Mandana, please tell us why you believe that Kamala Harris is the best choice for president and why other Jewish Americans should work with us to get her elected.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Hi, my name is Mandana Dayani. Maybe I can share a little bit about myself, which I think will help address the answer. I was born in Iran, in the middle of the Iran-Iraq war, among daily bombings, morality police, until we fled and eventually gained asylum to the United States as religious refugees through HIAS, which is an incredible Jewish organization that helps refugees resettle around the world and whose mission includes Welcome the Stranger. And I remember arriving in the United States in New York City and seeing the scariest place I'd ever seen, because it was so foreign to me and I didn't speak a word of English, and I held my mom's hand and I knew that we would be okay. And my entire life, I was raised with this profound sense of gratitude to this country for saving our lives. And that patriotism, and I think the Jewish values of Tikkun Olam have guided who I am entirely as a person. I lived the American dream. I've built a very full life and a career from truly nothing. And 6 years ago, I had just had my second daughter and I was running a big tech company and I was home on parental leave when I saw on my TV one of the worst humanitarian violations I had ever seen. Other families who had fled the worst imaginable circumstances to come to the United States to seek asylum were separated from their children. And I think that is the absolute worst thing you could ever do to another human being. And I think I just saw myself in so many of those kids and, you know, imagining what they went through, that we took the only safety that they had away from them. I got on a plane, I went to Tornillo, Texas, and I did everything I could just to get inside to see the first camp where the children were being held. And I think in that moment, I sort of knew that I had to do everything I could to help repair what felt like such a broken nation that I just loved so much. And I started taking meetings, and then meeting after meeting, I kept hearing that like real systemic change required higher voter turnout. So I quit my job, and with 25 amazing women and CAA, we built I'm a Voter, which is a nonpartisan civic engagement organization. As you said, we partnered with some of the biggest brands and celebrities in the world to inspire voter identity and participation. And that's everyone from like the NBA and Disney and Starbucks and H&M to like Jennifer Aniston and Steph Curry to Tom Ford, right? Like big cultural leaders integrating into TV shows, movies, retail stores, and huge digital activations. And really have since dedicated my life to my advocacy. And trust me, as someone who fled a dictatorship for the privilege of living under democracy, this is worth protecting and this is worth fighting for. And in this election, we have a very clear choice between one party who wants to uphold democracy and one who wants to dismantle it. We've seen Donald Trump blatantly say that you'll never have to vote again. This is going to be our last election, and regularly repeats rhetoric from other dictators. And then on the other hand, I've worked very closely with this administration, and I know how important it is to them to protect our democracy and so much that we hold so dearly. And that in this election, in every election, we're not just voting for ourselves, but we are voting for our neighbors and our communities. And that includes in this election, women's autonomy, IVF, the Supreme Court, gun safety, climate safety, voting rights, and the commitment to welcome the stranger. And these are not just democratic values or American values. Many are also Jewish values that I hold so dearly. And as a mother of 2 girls, only one of these administrations will create a better world for my daughters. And Kamala has done like what seemed like absolutely impossible in becoming the first woman vice president and the first woman of color, Black person, and first South Asian person elected to vice president. Our second gentleman, Doug, who I have the deepest just like love and respect and admiration for, is the first Jewish spouse, deeply committed to combating anti-Semitism. So yeah, I think if we hold these democratic American and Jewish values dear, we must organize to elect Kamala Harris.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it so much, Mandana. I'd now like to invite Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum. Rabbi Kleinbaum is the Senior Rabbi Emerita of New York City's Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, CBST, recently retired after an incredible 32 years as the head rabbi of the world's largest LGBTQI synagogue. She's also a former U.S. Commissioner of International Religious Freedom, having been appointed by President Biden. Rabbi, please tell us why you're supporting Kamala Harris for president and why we all must do this work to get her elected.
Well, Hallie, thank you so much for having me here and for all of you for organizing this. We all must do everything we can to get Vice President Kamala Harris to become our next president, which even saying those words, how exciting is that? How thrilling? How much does it make us feel like the possibilities that we couldn't imagine existing do exist? So I want to say a couple of words about first where we are in the Jewish year. We are in the middle of this very deep period of mourning, these 3 weeks of mourning that we consider in the depths of summer leading up to Rosh Chodesh Av coming week, and then Tisha B'Av itself. The reason that I say that is because our Jewish calendar helps us deal with the roller coaster of what life is like. And we're in the period of time in which we go deep into the pits of despair, but not only to stay in those pits of despair, but to emerge from them, because we believe on Tisha B'Av, the birth pangs, the beginnings, the possibilities of the messianic time, the Mashiach, will emerge from that level of despair. So the first thing I have to say is watching this vice president emerging into a soon-to-be formal nominee for president, when we think it will be very soon in these next few days of the voting of the delegates, we are seeing the possibilities of hope in a time in which so many people have been full of tremendous despair. And as the rabbi of this LGBT synagogue, and now emerita, as you correctly said, I'm now retired from it, I've been deeply engaged in issues around Judaism and the LGBT community, and I'm very moved by the role that the vice president played throughout her history in promoting and supporting the rights of LGBT people. She's been on the forefront of that, and she's been a very important voice in the legal system in California and making that a reality. I also want to point out that she's done something which is very complicated and shouldn't be so difficult to do, but in our current polarized climate seems to be almost impossible, but I think she is providing some important leadership on that. She is both supporting the right of the state of Israel to exist, to defend itself, and she is expressing profound compassion for the Palestinians, both inside of Gaza, in the West Bank, Israelis who and also are Israeli citizens. And I think for me and for most of my people, that vision of having a possibility of rejecting the binary, that in order to be supportive of the state of Israel, we have to not be supportive or aware of or embrace the compassion for or support the full liberation and justice for Palestinian people. I believe we see in this vice president, soon hopefully to be president, the example where it's possible to hold these things at the same time. I want to also just say one other word. I love that she has a sense of humor. We need somebody who can actually be able to laugh and bring us joy, even in the midst of terrible fear and anxiety. And we have to always remember, joy itself is an act of spiritual and political resistance. And I think Vice President Kamala Harris profoundly and beautifully exemplifies that and shows us the way. You know, in 1932 and 1933 in Germany, and there's a lot of discussion about the rise of the National Socialist Party, the Nazi Party, and Hitler. It was possible because all of the other parties, had they joined together, they had the numbers to prevent the Nazi Party from winning in the election in early 1933. But those parties could not agree. The parties who were on the outside, so to speak, of the Nazi system were fighting among themselves, and each imagined they would somehow succeed if the Nazis succeeded and they would be able to control them. We know that's not possible. We must do everything we can to understand the existential threat, this moment that we're in, and where the United States lands will have an impact on every country in the world, on all of the profound issues that we as Jews, I believe, care so deeply about as human beings. And I'm so proud to throw my total support behind and will do everything I can. And I urge everybody on this call to commit ourselves to going out there and doing everything we can to make sure that Kamala Harris becomes our next president of the United States. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. We appreciate it. I would now like to welcome award-winning comedian and writer Alex Edelman, who wrote and performs Just for Us, which is, for those who haven't seen it, most of you I assume have, I hope have, but it's a true story of Alex, an Orthodox Jew, attending a meeting of white nationalists. Alex, somehow you found your way out of this meeting and made it into a story that is deeply personal, that's funny and entertaining, but ultimately it's a warning for all of us. So Alex, if you could please talk about why you're supporting Kamala Harris for president.
Well, look, I just think it's always been such an easy time. It's such an easy time to be a Jew right now. And, really it was sort of a coin flip decision for me, and really can't, like, there are almost an infinite number of good reasons to sit down and support, like if you sat down and thought about like why you're going to support Kamala, I think you could probably talk for like a couple of hours just in bullet points about like the reasons that you were going to choose this one side. But look, I've worked closely with the administration. That's not true. I don't work closely with the administration, but I've seen Kamala and the second gentleman, as Rabbi Holtzblatt said, quietly and behind the scenes, work very diligently to figure out what the real issues are for Jewish Americans, not just the ones that are grabby and headliney and sort of grippy and like in the news, and to try to ameliorate the pain of Jews, particularly young Jews. Doug is really, really. I love. We shouldn't. If Kamala is elected president, I don't want the title to be first gentleman. I just want to be like, here's the president of the United States, Kamala Harris, and Doug. Like, I want no title for him. He should be as informal as he feels to talk to. He's like, these are real human beings. These are people who genuinely want to ease the pain of as many people as they possibly can. And the care that I've watched them take with the Jewish community, particularly with young Jews, has been like, it's hard to say that something is inspiring, such a cliche, but like it actually has been. And Doug has really dedicated himself in particular to those causes, and he's worked with Ambassador Lipstadt and many others to do those things. I actually feel very personally offended to see Donald Trump say things like, Donald Trump was on a radio show or something and someone called Doug a crappy Jew and he agreed. And I should be so lucky to be as crappy a Jew as Doug Emhoff. It is truly like, this is someone who cares deeply about where they're from and cares deeply about the community that they feel strongly a part of, and has been fighting as quietly and diligently for that community. Though the one thing I want to say, I only want to say one thing really, because like other people will come with like policy stuff, and people will talk about how Kamala and the second gentleman reflect like Jewish values, but everybody has different policy things that are important to them, and everybody has different understandings of what Jewish values are. Although if you can find me a Jewish value that you think Donald Trump reflects better than Kamala Harris, I'd be really interested to hear that. I just think that everyone on this call, they are probably more informed than me. And they're probably, not everyone, I'm sure there are a couple of people who are just curious, but and are like, wait, who's running for president? But I think most of you guys probably know exactly why you're voting for Kamala and why you're supporting Kamala. I just really want to quickly talk about how to do that, because this is going to be such a tightly contested election, and it's going to come down to people talking to their friends, which sounds like really silly and small, but it's going to come down to having conversations with people in your community and encouraging them to vote, and phone banking, and being highly participatory and highly motivated, because look, these elections have been won and lost by very small margins, and like we are a small percentage of we are like a rounding error in the population. And but we are highly motivated and have had big impacts on elections up and down the ballot. And so please, if you are on this call, please do everything you can, because like you're gonna want to say that you did everything you can. And there are a million good reasons to. And by the way, if you could do it without the rancorous toxicity of the other side, that would be especially wonderful. So yeah. And not so much to say something nice about why about Kamala Harris's policies, but like I think they're lovely people, and I think you should get out there to vote for vote for them and phone back for them and do all the stuff. So
Okay, thank you so much, Alex. Thanks for bringing comedy into.
No,
You
all
do?
serious, 100% serious, no irony.
Yeah, no. But at the beginning, a little bit, and I don't think there's any Jewish value that we can find that Donald Trump reflects better than Kamala Harris. Not a one.
Nope. Shotness? No, that's a very, very esoteric reference about separating wool and linen. Okay, I'm gonna go. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Thank you. Okay, now we are happy to hear from author, political strategist, and founder of the Hopium Chronicles, Simon Rosenberg. Now, for those who don't know Simon, he has been at this for decades. He's a great political strategist and Democrat. And in 2022, Simon was the first person who was saying there would be no red wave. This was before the overturn of Roe. And the Republicans turned and said, what are you smoking, opium? And Simon brilliantly not only was right, there was no red wave, of course, but turned it into a movement. So Simon, if you could talk about the work that you're doing and why not only must we elect Kamala Harris, but why you think she's going to win, because we could use some hopium.
Hopium abounds these days, I think, Haley. And listen, it's always great to be with you. These are my favorite events that I get to do. And so thank you so much. Certainly the most meaningful to me personally. Let me say three things today. Number one, I think there are three things that have contributed to this magical moment that we're in, and this sense of possibility that we all have. One is Trump's picking of JD Vance, which was an enormous mistake, and I think capped or diminished the momentum that he may have had coming out of the convention, because even for many Republicans, JD Vance was a bridge too far. Commander Vance, as I call him, out of the Handmaid's Tale wing of the Republican Party. Number two was Joe Biden's remarkably selfless act to step aside, which was deeply powerful, emotional, patriotic, historic, and that I think we're still all thinking about and coming to terms with. It was such a powerful affirmation of our democracy and the way that democracies are supposed to work, where there is no indispensable man in a democracy. That's what autocracies are about. And third is then Kamala Harris just meeting the moment, coming out so strong, so commanding, so articulate and powerful about what she wanted to do and where she wanted to take the country. I think all of these were unknowns a few weeks ago, and they've all come together to create this remarkable moment that we're in, where we feel this optimism, these new vibes, as people are calling it. You saw the fundraising numbers today. 3 million people gave money to the Harris campaign last month. 2 million people were new donors. Those are crazy numbers, right? We've had unprecedented number of volunteers, and we've started seeing in real data now what's happening. Last week, I think if you looked at the polls, she caught up. I mean, Biden was down a couple points, and last week she caught up. This week she went ahead, and she's now ahead by 1 to 2 points in the national polling. 538 just released their first average, and she's up 1.5 points in that average. And that's even with junky Republican polls in there. And in the battlegrounds, there were 2 battleground state polls this week. And in those 2 polls, she was ahead in either of the 2 polls in Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and she was tied in Georgia and 2 points down in North Carolina. So it's a new bluer election. And we are now, let's say, slightly ahead, and certainly tied or even slightly ahead in the electoral or in the battleground states. And that's before a series of really important things are going to happen, right? We still, I think, are witnessing the coming together around her, the rallying around her, which I don't think is finished yet. I think it's still happening. Second is we're going to have next week, we're going to have a VP pick and a VP week, and it's going to be really uplifting, I think, for us. And then we have our convention, and that conventional wisdom is that parties gain 2 to 3 points in that kind of period, right? And we're already ahead. And then we have this other thing that's going to happen that could also gain us a point or two, which is we're going to have the most powerful democratic political machine that's ever been built to push the early vote and GOTV. And so I think today we're favored. And I think for us to close here, we have to learn how to close out of joy and of power. I loved, by the way, the speakers today have been amazing. I've learned so much, I've gotten so motivated by this. And we're not going to be operating, I think, in these final few weeks entirely out of fear, but out of this sense of possibility and opportunity that we're on offense now. We're playing to win. We're not playing to catch up. And I think that's a more powerful way to play the game, actually, in my view, because it brings more people along. It's more attractive. It's more interesting. It's more compelling. Joy is better than fear. And so I'll close with this, is that Kamala said something really important, and I've known her for over 20 years, and I'm so proud of her and what she's been able to do, is that she said the other day that the baton hasn't been passed to her, it's been passed to us. And I think she's right about that. And if we do the work, we're going to go win this election. We're going to make Kamala Harris president of the United States. And hopefully we're going to begin the process of flushing MAGA into the dustbin of history where it belongs. But it really comes down to what we all do together and how hard we work. If we want to have the election we all want to have, we have to take the baton and leave it all on the playing field and get this done for our kids and our grandkids, for our future, our freedoms, and our democracy. So thank you all so much. Haley, it's always great to be with you. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you, Simon. I'll be on the relay team with you any day. Thank you, Simon. Okay, we now have Representative Susan Wild. Congresswoman Susan Wild, it was the first woman to represent Pennsylvania's 7th district. And it's a tight election every cycle, and we are so proud to support you. Congresswoman, and we'd like to hear today why we should support Kamala Harris for president, why you're supporting her, but also we're working hard to make sure the Democrats win back the House as well, so we can continue to keep Democrats who share our values, like you, in Congress. So feel free to mention that too.
Thank you, Hallie, and thank you so much. I'm always proud to be endorsed by JDCA, and for those who don't know, I am the only Jewish federal elected official in Pennsylvania. Of course, we have a stellar governor who also is, but I wanted to thank the Harris campaign and the Jewish Democratic Council of America for inviting me to speak with all of you. And I just think it's such a blessing when I get to discuss the issues that matter in my community and across the country. And I really am happy to have this opportunity to speak about what's at stake in the election. As I said, my name's Susan Wild. I represent Pennsylvania's 7th congressional district. And as Hallie said, my race is always super close. It is projected to be one of the closest in the country this year. I think they've got me in the top 3 in terms of tough races. And if we want to take back the majority, we have to hold on to our incumbents. And so that's what I will say about my race. But the other thing that I will say about my race is that my district, I mean, obviously it's Pennsylvania, right? The great swing state of Pennsylvania. My district is the great swing district of Pennsylvania. And one of my counties is a bellwether county. They went for Obama, Trump, Biden, and fill in the blank for this year, hopefully Harris. And it is absolutely ground zero for winning Pennsylvania at the presidential level and for anybody running for statewide office. So there's a lot of relevance to my district that makes it very exciting. We also get a lot of people that come in from out of state, from safer blue areas to knock doors and that kind of thing. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot of that. Just so you know a little bit about my background, I was born in Germany on a military and on an Air Force base. My dad was a career Air Force officer. We moved around a whole lot during my early life, but Pennsylvania is where I found my home in the 80s when I was relatively newly married. Later had my children here, raised them here when they went to public schools, except for their preschool and kindergarten years when they were at our local JCC. I studied for my bat mitzvah right here with them. Actually, it was eventually bat mitzvahed with a close friend who lives right down the street from me when we went to Israel. And it's where it is home. Some people around here think that only living in a place for 36 years means you're a newcomer. But trust me, when you grow up as a military brat, 36 years is a really long time to be anywhere. And as the only Jewish member of the Pennsylvania congressional delegation, I feel a real responsibility to ensure that I'm advocating for our Jewish community at the local, state, and federal level. Just the other day, when the Tree of Life Synagogue was vandalized horrifically, I led the other Jewish members of Congress, none of whom are from Pennsylvania, in a statement condemning that. And I wanted to make sure that people understood that, yes, there is a there is a Jewish presence in Pennsylvania and not just in Philadelphia. But it's a very purple state. And the political season has officially started and the commercials are on the air. And I just want to share with you a little bit about what I'm hearing on the ground. Let me just start by saying that the newfound energy that we see as a result of Kamala Harris being at the top of the ticket is really refreshing. I felt as though I could eke out a win even with Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. I was less optimistic about whether he could win here because our polling was not looking good for him at all. We have not polled since Kamala's been in. But what I am seeing is just this surge that we are seeing across the country of enthusiasm from people who had kind of checked out this year, and people who often check out in election years. And I don't mean to disparage any one group, but young people and some minorities and so forth, and just tremendous enthusiasm. So I want to share with you what I am doing whenever I talk to anybody who is newly enthusiastic. I pull out my phone, and on my phone, I have a QR code that they can take a picture of, and it takes them right to Pennsylvania voter registration so they can check their voter registration status. And while they're there, I also say to them, okay, do you need to vote by mail? Are you in college or, out of state or something? And then I show them where they can apply for their vote by mail ballot. Because obviously all this enthusiasm doesn't do us any good unless these people are registered to vote and actually turn out. So I hope that everybody everywhere is encouraging that enthusiasm, but also encouraging people to do what is really a very small task, and that is check their voter registration and get registered. I want to talk a little bit about some of the issues that resonate in my district that I think are so perfect for the Harris / fill in the blank ticket. Of course, there's a lot of speculation about my governor possibly being her running mate. Who knows? I'll be very excited if that's the case, although all of us in Pennsylvania will be a little bit sad to lose him as our governor. But I think he would bring a lot to the ticket, but that's all I'm going to say. And obviously, we're fortunate to have such a deep bench among our VP possibilities this year. It's amazing. I've never seen so many people actually excited about who the vice presidential pick might be. That's not usually something that gets talked about. So that's kind of fun. But I want to talk for a moment about reproductive rights, which we all know is so much on the ticket. And it's one of the things that I find incredibly special about Jewish culture. Our views as a religion on life and pregnancy, but I also am very aware that it's it's a complicated issue in my district, and it's not in every district, but it is in mine. So I try to meet people where they are, and I try to find common ground with them. And one of the ways that I have been able to lately is by talking about in vitro fertilization, which, whoever thought that was going to become a big part of campaigns. But right after the Dobbs decision, which set us back 50 years on the issue of abortion, and after I read the Justice Thomas opinion, my first thought went to IVF. And a lot of that was because I have so many members of my family and among my friends who themselves depended on IVF to start a family. And so my office started working on an IVF bill very soon after the Dobbs decision. I'm proud to announce that we actually filed the bill in January. It's called the Access to Family Building Act. And by the way, it was filed before the Alabama court decision came down. It was a couple of weeks before that. I didn't know that was coming. And that decision criminalized IVF in the state of Alabama. So what I often do is if I'm with a group that I sense is not completely open to a discussion about abortion access, I will pivot to talking about fertility treatments, contraception, and that kind of thing, and how those things are so under fire by the MAGA extremists and by the GOP in general. I'm part of a Congress that the majority, the Republicans, voted at the beginning of this Congress on a fetal personhood bill. In other words, to state that life begins at conception, which means if that were the case, and if that were to pass and become the law of the land, IVF as a matter of science would have to be eliminated because it involves fertilizing an egg and creating embryos, and some of those embryos may or may not eventually be used. So it's something that it kind of piques people's interest, and it just gives me a different way to talk about reproductive rights. However, I have to say to you that reproductive rights, including choice, resonate in my district a lot. In the last campaign cycle in 2020, we did focus groups. I never watch my own focus groups because you don't want to really be on the other side of one-way glass, seeing what people say about you when they don't know you're watching. So I've never done it. But what I was told by my team was that our focus group, which had a lot of people who had voted for Trump previously, almost uniformly said they could not vote for somebody who was not pro-choice, including the Trump voters. And that was very encouraging and is obviously something that is still an issue that resonates here in Pennsylvania 7.
And
so
speaking of polling and focus groups, 88% of Jewish voters support abortion being legal in all or some cases. It's an issue that transcends politics in our community. And it's yet another reason that Jewish Americans stand with Kamala Harris to defend our reproductive rights and defend
what's that
the federal
again?
abortion ban.
What
So
was that percentage?
thank you so much, Congresswoman. Thank you. We appreciate it very much. We're rooting for everyone in Pennsylvania and working with you as well to also flip the House from red to blue. Okay, next we are going to hear from Randy Weingarten. Randy is the president of the American Federation of Teachers and an advocate for working families everywhere. Randy, thank you so much for joining us. If you could speak about why you are supporting Kamala Harris for president.
So I'm donning my, t-shirt, which is the Kamala Harris for President t-shirt that we already got from our convention a couple of weeks ago. But let me just do this, Hallie. Thank you so much for having me on. Normally I don't speak at a event that is geared to Jews. Normally I speak to labor audiences or education audiences. But I think just like what Simon said, and frankly, Sharon said, and others, there is such a contrast here right now. And I think it's really important to take a step back and to look at it. Right after October 7th, people like Joe Biden went to Israel to essentially do a shiva call. Chuck Schumer went to Israel to do a shiva call. I didn't see Donald Trump going to Israel. Kamala Harris, as you've said over and over again, people have said, she has spent time with hostage families. She actually spent time with Netanyahu last week and talked about it afterwards in a way that was embracive and bringing in both Jews and Palestinians. What Donald Trump does is he tries to create fear, not joy, not hope, and a sense of fear, and that he alone can fix it. That sounds like an autocrat. And if we look at the long history of Jewish discrimination and persecution, it always comes when there is an autocrat. What Kamala Harris is doing is building on what she and Joe Biden did to make an economy that works for all, to try to take away the issues that create fear, to try to take away the division. Look at what she said after Donald Trump went after her. Look at what she said about same old, when he tried to do these racist tropes against her, when he tried to take her down. What we need, and Simon said this as well, is we need hope versus fear, aspiration that's grounded in reality versus despair. And that is what Kamala Harris has given us in the last 2 weeks. Think about what Joe Biden did. He and she created an economy, an industrial policy to change things, 16 million jobs, to make America work again and feel like we have a future again. And what she has done in the last 2 weeks is she has done that every day, talking about joy, talking about future, talking about freedoms, talking about the importance of public education, talking about the importance of all of us. And ultimately, that is why I think we will win, and why I would ask every Jew that is on this Zoom to not only vote for Kamala Harris, but to think about a country that is about aspiration, about hope, about fighting discrimination and bigotry for everyone, or for all of us. Because at the end of the day, if we have a country based on hope and based on freedom and a vision for the future, not the despair and hate and anger that Donald Trump and other autocrats try to do, that is when Jews thrive. And if we have a country that believes in our allies and will work with our allies, that is how Israel will thrive. 2 states for 2 peoples, as opposed to a group of states around it that want to undermine and kill it. So it's the excitement In my convention, we had her the Thursday after she announced and after Joe Biden, who I thought did the most patriotic of things. I love that man. And I love what he and she have done in this period of time. In what they did from this country that was in such terrible shape after January 6th, and how they have lifted the country up, even with all the despair and all the lies of Trump. But think about what they can do. Think about what they can do. I saw that incredible excitement in my own convention. The hope, the possibility, the freedom, the education, the opportunity, not just to get by, but to thrive. That's what Kamala Harris does for us. Freedom, security, safety, opportunity, justice. So we got a job to do, which is get on our walking shoes, knock on those doors, talk to people who are frightened. People are frightened by anti-Semitism. People are frightened by the world. Let's get out and talk to people about what a future can be, built on the Biden-Harris future administration that has been. What a future can be. A future of peace, a future of security, a future of justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for mentioning freedom. That's the Vice President's walk-on song from Beyonce and Kendrick Lamar, and that's why we played it at the beginning of this webinar. Thank you. We are now going to hear from Sarah Hurwitz. Sarah, we're very proud, is a member of our New Leaders Council. She is also an author. She wrote Here All Along, a book about rediscovering Judaism, and she served as speechwriter for both President Obama and the First Lady Obama, as well as Hillary Clinton. Sarah, we're so happy to have you. Please talk to us about why you're supporting Vice President Harris.
Thank you so much, Haley. So I'm writing a second book now, and it's about how anti-Semitism has shaped Jewish history, a topic that is unfortunately quite timely. And I've been spending a lot of time immersed in Jewish history. And I've been thinking a lot about the present in light of that history. And I have to tell you, when I saw former President Trump publicly denouncing Jews who vote for Democrats like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, claiming that they hate Israel, that they hate Judaism, implying that they're somehow disloyal to their own tradition, I thought about history. And I thought about what's happened when leaders have felt entitled to divide Jews up into good Jews and bad Jews and treat them accordingly. And it terrified me. And when I see former President Trump continuing again and again to trash our most sacred and fundamental democratic institutions, I think about history. I think about what happens to Jews when dictators rise up and the rule of law breaks down. And if anyone thinks that the collapse of American democracy is somehow good for our allies, if you think an America in chaos will be good for Israel, if you think that a reckless, corrupt leader surrounded by incompetent cronies is good for our friends across the globe, with all due respect, I think you are sorely, sorely mistaken. So this is not a hard choice. In this election, I'm going to be choosing the candidate who started her career fighting for the rule of law and who has never once wavered in that commitment. And I'm going to be choosing the candidate who is passionately devoted to democracy and who has never wavered in that commitment. And I'm going to be choosing the candidate who respects me as a Jew and as a woman and as an American. So this is really not a hard choice. And for the next 3 months, we have all got to get out there and we have got to organize and persuade and empower and inspire people to do whatever it takes to elect Kamala Harris as our next president. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Appreciate it. We will now close with our final speaker, Rabbi Sharon Brous. Rabbi Brous is the senior and founding rabbi of ICAR in Los Angeles, and she's the author of The Amen Effect, which is very relevant for today's conversation in terms of showing up and building community, which is exactly what we've done here on this call. Rabbi, we're happy to have you. And could you please talk about why you're supporting the vice president for president?
Absolutely. Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Ron and Bobby and the JDCA and everybody who's spoken. I know the hour is late and we're wrapping up just now. I want to just bring to light one issue that we haven't yet addressed. I really agree with Simon that joy is better than fear as an organizing principle, but I need to speak to us briefly about what I see as really the greatest threat facing the planet today, which is the threat of extremism. And I want to say this today, not to scare us, but just to be clear about what is at stake in this moment and in this election. In our country and around the world, extremists are working to control women's bodies, to control the bodies of LGBTQ people. They want to arm the nation while they're fueling a race war. They want to do everything in their power to thwart efforts at climate justice, sending us off the edge of the climate abyss. They want to keep us hurtling toward endless war in Israel, dooming our Jewish family and our Palestinian neighbors to suffer under a region that is run by zealots and arsonists, when what we know is that we need sane and centered leadership that will reject the false binaries of our time and is ready to pursue a vision of a just and shared future. The extremists that are at the top of the GOP ticket are cloaked in the robes of the rhetoric of white Christian nationalism, and they're making common cause with all of the extremists around the world who are threatening our future, our safety, our dignity, our dreams. It's really important for us to be clear-eyed about this. Every religious tradition and every nation has to contend with its marginal voices. The danger of this moment is that when marginal voices become the mainstream, everything is at risk. When people move from provocateurs to policymakers or gadflies to government officials, we are all at risk because of their violent rhetoric and their violent actions and their fantasy of a fascist theocracy. We are all right now in danger, not only as a Jewish community, but also as a democracy, of hurtling toward a very, very dangerous future. In the face of so much violence and so much violent rhetoric, many of us were starting to feel hopeless. But then something absolutely wonderful blew across this country about 12 days ago. From the depths of our despair, Kamala Harris emerged and inspired a transformation in the heart of the country and shifted us from breakfast to dinner. You saw a transformation in the mindset of millions and millions of people in this country, because suddenly there was a person at the top of our ticket who was asking us to imagine a different kind of future, one that was not built on extreme vision of America, but instead built on a vision of justice and human dignity and peace, one where workers get paid fair wages, where women have bodily autonomy, where LGBTQ people are loved and dignified, where racism and poverty and climate devastation are not inevitabilities. Kamala Harris is reminding us with every speech and with every statement that this story is not yet over. She's spoken about this publicly, and she and I and Doug and I have spoken about this privately. As Rabbi Holtzblatt said earlier, VP Harris is deeply empathetic to the Jewish story, to our trauma, to our values, to our dreams. She shares those dreams because these are her dreams too. She stands before the nation today, insisting that in the face of the threat of extremism and in the face of so many intersecting crises, there is another way. It is not the way of war, it is the way of peace. It is not the way of degradation and dehumanization, but the way of dignity, not the way of extremism, but the way of compassion and reason. That is the promise of this campaign. I am so grateful to President Joe Biden for all that he gave to this country, and especially for this final blessing, for giving us the blessing of Kamala Harris at precisely the moment when she is offering us a very different vision of what our future could look like. I could not be more honored and more excited to support Kamala Harris and her campaign to become president of the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. And over to Bobby Saperstein, our official chief program officer, to close today's event. But before we go to Bobby, I just want to thank everyone for joining. This was a really powerful demonstration that Jewish Americans do support Kamala Harris for president because she shares our values. She stands with us and we stand with her. And we're so proud to do it. Over to you, Bobby, to wrap today's event.
Thank you so much, Haley. And thank you to all of our guests, Jewish Women for Kamala, Democratic Jewish Outreach of Pennsylvania, and to the more than 3,500 of you who signed up for today's program. Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear, is how the Jewish people responded when accepting the Torah at Mount Sinai. Our tradition teaches that Torah without action, values without action, or said differently, words without action, is empty. Last night, we saw both words and actions exemplified by the stunning visuals of President Biden and Vice President Harris on the tarmac greeting Evan Gershkovich, Paul Whelan, and others who have been wrongly detained by Russia. And throughout the past 3.5 years, we have witnessed both words and deeds come to fruition as the Biden-Harris administration and Democrats in Congress who share our values have taken action to deliver for the American people and enact bold legislation that has helped millions of Americans and people around the world. Here at JDCA, we know that leaders we elect and the policies they put in place have very real consequences for all of us. As we've heard today, we know that, and it's up to each of us to ensure that we continue this progress by electing Vice President Harris as our next president. Please visit jewishdems.org to learn about all the ways you can get involved, including becoming a JDCA member, volunteering, and making a financial contribution to support our election-related work. We hope you'll join us wherever you are by joining one of our state and local chapters and affiliates made up of grassroots volunteers. Throughout the next 95 days, JDCA will be running phone banks on behalf of Kamala Harris and other endorsed Democrats across the country. Please visit the links in the chat to sign up and join us for our weekly phone banks as we make calls to Jewish voters in key swing states across the country, including Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, and many others. Again, the links are in the chat. Now let's get to work after Shabbat. In conclusion, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for being a part of JDCA. Take care.